Right, the goal in this video is to take the information that the user filled out, the description, the image, and when they tap on submit, actually make a request to parse to take that data and create a new Instagram post. A lot of the complexity here is going to be how do we actually let the user take a picture and get that picture, whatever they've taken, in our application, save it, and then send it up to parse. So for now, let's actually not worry about that complexity and only worry about handling the description part. So let's comment out query post for now because we don't need that. When the user taps on the submit button, let's add a click listener. So when the user has tapped on the button, we want to collect all the information and create a post out of that. There are three pieces of information that we need: the description, the user, and the image. So first, the description, that's easy. We just need to look at the text from the edit text. And one thing we can do here, just some quick error handling. So if the description is empty, then we don't want to allow the user to create a post. So we'll show a toast message saying description can't be empty. Otherwise, the description is valid. So what we'll do next is get the user. The user is easy because it's just whoever is signed in right now. And then we're going to call a method called save post, which will take in the description and the current user. So here, the way to create a new post is just call the empty constructor, new post, and then we'll set different attributes on it. So you'll remember that we have different setter methods on the post. So set description, set image, and set user. So setting the description is simply a matter of passing in the description that we have. And then we do eventually want to call set image, but we don't have the image right now, so I'm going to comment that out. And then we want to set the user. Once we have our post object, we can now call post.save in background. And this will take in a save callback. Okay, like usual, if the exception is not null, that means something has gone wrong. So error while saving, and then we can include the exception here. Let's also show a toast. Otherwise, we were able to properly save the new post in our backend. So we can say log.i. If we did save the post properly, let's clear out whatever text the user had written in that edit text for the description. This gives the user some obvious visual indication that it succeeded, and we want to make sure that they don't save the same post twice. Let's try it now. So I'm just going to put in some dummy text here, hello world. This take picture button doesn't do anything, but now if I tap on submit, so we did clear the description, which is an indication that this worked as we expected. And if I refresh this page from the Parse dashboard, you can now see we do have another post called Hello World. And the image, as we expected, is undefined. And the user, if we tap on that, is me, like the Rahul username. So what we've done is we're able to write data into our backend properly. Now we'd like to be able to allow the user to take a picture and add that into their Instagram post. In order to do that, we're going to have to access the camera. So if you scroll down, there's a wiki page about taking a photo and accessing the camera. This is actually quite involved because what we're going to do is delegate the work of taking a picture and writing to the file system to the camera app, which is on every phone, and then read that back in our application. And that communication takes some doing. And we'll talk about how that works. But before we go into the guide, at a high level, the way this is going to work is when the user taps on take picture, that will trigger an intent to open up the camera. The user will be able to take a picture using the camera and save that image to somewhere on the file system, which is accessible both by the camera app and by our application, or the Instagram clone. Then we're going to come back into our application and we'll use that in order to show the bitmap or the image that was taken and show it in the image view and attach that as part of the Instagram post. So the way this is going to work is, if you'll recall, there are two kinds of intents. explicit intents and implicit intents. Explicit intents are when you're trying to launch an activity which is inside your own application. We don't have a camera activity in our application. We could do that, but that's a lot more work. And we actually would like to just take advantage of the inbuilt camera app on all phones. And so what we're going to do instead is launch an implicit intent and say, hey, we want any app on our phone which handles a camera intent to open up and allow the user to take a picture. When that finishes, we'll come back into our app and then simply take the result and show it in the image view. So there are two ways, like we talked about. The first way is launching the camera with an implicit intent, designating a file path of where that picture will be stored, and handling the on-activity result. The hard way is to actually use the camera API to embed the camera preview within your app. And probably most sophisticated apps will do this. So the actual Instagram app, they're not delegating the work to a camera app. They actually have a very advanced camera inside of their own app. And that allows you to do things like custom controls and filters and all these other things. So to get started, what we'll do is go back into the code and add a click listener on the button capture image. And then we'll have a method here called launch camera. So going back into the guide, there is a method here, which is what's doing the implicit intent to launch an action image capture. So I'm actually going to go ahead and just copy this whole thing. So we'll import intent, import media store, URI, file provider, and then this has to change to be the name of our activity, which is main activity. And then we need to define this image activity request code, capture image request code. This is just some arbitrary number which is unique in your application. The public static final int, and then we'll give it some arbitrary value of 42. Okay, so there still is some red because there's a method here called getPhotoURI, which we haven't defined yet. And this is actually going to populate a member variable called photo_file. So let's define that. Private file photo file. And the file name we also should define up here. And then if we go back here, we can see there's a photo file name. So we'll add that in. So now we have to define this method getPhotoFileURI. So that's this method here. So again, there's some imports. We called app tag just tag in our version. And then we can actually simplify this a little bit. Now all the red or build errors are gone from the file, so we are able to build the app properly, but we still won't be able to take a picture. And that's because there is something around file providers, which we still haven't done yet. But before we get to that part of the guide, I want to talk about what we've actually put into our app, just so we have a better understanding about it. So the idea here is that we're making an implicit intent for action image capture. And what we need to do is indicate to the application that we launch, where do you want to put the output? And so that's what this extra on the intent is for. So we're passing in file provider, and this is something that we're going to set up next. But the file provider is what wraps the photo file. Then we're checking, is there actually an application which can handle this intent? And almost every phone should have a camera, so this will almost always pass. And then we're saying start activity for result, which is the image capture intent to take a photo. And then this method here is just a helper in order to be able to get the photo file URI. URI stands for Uniform Resource Identifier, which is a string which unambiguously identifies a resource. And so the resource in our case is the file representing our image that we captured. Next, open up this guide, which we have from the comments here, about sharing files with API 24 or higher. API 24 came out a few years ago, so most apps should be targeting API 24 or higher. And this is an additional security restriction which Android has placed on these apps which are targeting newer APIs. The idea is that simply specifying a file to write to can lead to a lot of concern, because the application that is opened up from our application to take the picture may not be able to access that file. So instead, what the workaround is to have our application become a content provider. And then we'll wrap the file object representing our camera as a content provider. And we'll do that using the file provider class. So what we're going to do is copy this provider tag, go into Android manifest, and then where the application tag opens up here, copy in the provider. So here, you'll notice that this is referencing Android resource called XML file provider, and we don't have that defined yet. Go into the resources folder, create a new resources directory. This is going to be of type XML, and hit enter. And inside of here, we want to create a new XML resource file called file provider. So if you scroll down, here's what we'll copy into that file. And so what we're saying here is that the application that is launched from our app has access to our external storage directory, and in particular, the pictures path of our external files. This way, we can allow sharing between these two applications. So let me exit out of here now. And one thing you also want to make sure is that the authorities listed here, Codepath file provider, should match up exactly with the authority over here. So if you run the app now, when we tap on take picture, we should actually open up the new application, which will allow us to take a picture. So here, this is the default camera app on my phone, on my emulator. So there's some initial setup. And now you can see that this is the camera view. So if I tap on the ability to take a picture, there's no way right now to come back to our application. And that's what we're going to fix next. The way this will work is we've launched the new activity with start activity for result. The way we can get the image taken by the user is by overriding this method on activity result. This method will be invoked when the child application returns to the parent application, which is the Instagram clone. So if we go back to the guide, we can get rid of this tab and go back to accessing the camera. So here is what we want now. So we need to import a few more things like usual. And the idea here is that if the request code matches up with the request code with how we started the activity, and then we want to check if the result code is okay, which means the user actually took the picture. If this is not the case, that means that the picture wasn't taken, though they've actually canceled out of that flow. Now we have a camera photo on disk. So we can decode the file, which is this bitmap. And now we can set it on the image. We already have access to the image. We call it IV post image, and we'll set the image bitmap to take an image. Here, Android Studio is complaining that we need to add a call to the superclass. If we run the app now, we should have the same flow, but now when the camera application launches, we take a picture, we should have the option to come back to our application. So let's take a picture. I'll take a photo here. And now if I tap on the checkbox, we have now triggered the onActivity result, which is setting that image bitmap on our image view. The one thing you might run into, as is hinted at in the comments, is that you might run into out of memory. Especially on older emulators, the actual size of this photo taken is large, and so this bitmap is quite large, and it might exceed the memory available to your application. So if you do encounter that, then there's a couple options here to store a smaller bitmap to disk, and then you can resize the image. So luckily, we're not facing that. If you're on a modern emulator, you hopefully shouldn't see that, so we don't have to worry about it. Once onActivity result comes back and the result code is okay, at this point, our photo file is properly filled out. So now we can amend our save post method to include photo file. So I'm going to add photo file right here. And this is going to complain because we need to add the file as a third parameter, so I'll let Android Studio help us with that. And now we have the file here, so we can say post.setImage, and we need to pass in a new parse file. And this takes in a single parameter, which is the photo file. One thing we can do is, similar to how we're checking if the description is empty, we also want to do some error checking if the photo file is empty. So we'll say if photo file is null, or there is no image preview being shown. We also want to inform the user of that. IV post image, if the drawable is null, that means that the user is trying to submit a post without having an image data. And then we want to return. Otherwise, we can properly save it, and then we are doing the normal behavior with parse, and we should see this log message post save was successful. And similar to how we are clearing out the edit text for the description, we want to do something similar for the image view. And the way we can do that is by saying IV post image dot set image resource, and then pass in a resource ID of 0, which means the empty resource ID. So let's try it. Let's provide a description of awesome. Take a picture. And let's take a picture of this nice dog over here. Now let's submit. So you can see that the description and the image view got cleared out. And if you open up Logcat, then you can see that the post save was successful. So now if we go back into our parse dashboard, we should hopefully see one more row here. And we do. We see awesome. And let's download the image. And you can see it is exactly what our emulator camera was showing, this picture of the dog. And the user is me, username Rahul. So as a review, what we've done so far is set up the UI to log in, take a picture, submit that picture, and properly save it into Parse. Next, we'll worry about how to retrieve these Instagram posts from the backend and displaying it in a recycler view. If you had any trouble, and there are a lot of places where things could go wrong, so go back into the course portal and take a thorough look at these guides. There's a lot of detail here of things that could go wrong and what to do. And if you do have any questions, let us know and we'll help you out as much as possible.